Okay, so we're going to mix a tiny bit. This is the water base. It's a 2-pack. This is the clear base, and then there's a final coat, and this is some hardWax oil. So with the hardWax oil, you can see how thick it is, sort of regular hardWax oil. I'm just going to put a drop. It's not very scientific. Tiny drop of white spirit. Just mix that up. You can see it now. It's like water now. Pretty much the same as putting hardWax oil. I'm going to put it on everywhere so that all the surfaces, edges and everything have the same material on for buffing later. So that's the underside. With these little triangles, you have to be very careful. They can dig in the wood. So now they've been placed on there, you don't want to push too hard. I know with hardWax oil, you would normally rub it off, buff it off. I'm not going to do that. I want it to soak in. I do not care whether it lifts the grain or affects the grain, because you know we're going to be sanding this, but you can already get an idea of how it's going to look. To let that soak into the wood. Once that's soaked in, we're in a nice warm room here in the resin room. Once that's soaked in, I'm going to hit that again. So that's the oil one. Now let's go and do the water based. So this needs to be 20% of the hardener and 20% warm water, not hot. Same amount. Okay. It's just watered down a little bit. It's quite a thick substance. You can put this on with a cloth. The final one I'll put on with a roller, but I just want to get it into the grain now. Now, as I said, the water base, this will lift the grain. This cloth's wet from before when I wiped the thing. So we just leave that to soak in now. Again, it's looking, just take my gloves off, I'll show you the resin. Very difficult to see those scratches from the 240, and the black's a bit smudgy from the oil, but very difficult. There's no sort of ice skating marks, as I said. But let's leave all that. You see the oil sitting on the top. I'm going to leave that now. It's really warm in here. And humidity is 50, so it's pretty good. I'm just going to leave that for a few hours to set in. I may hit it again. If I do, I'll show you. If not, the next stage is going to be to go up to the 320 and through to the 800, and let's see how that goes. If that's looking really good at 800, then I'm going to give that another oil, and then before I do any more to this, I will let that oil fully cure, maybe for 2 days. Then I'll hit this with a polishing compound across the two. That will be our finish. Okay, so it's been overnight. If you listen, it's very grain lifted. If you look here, you can actually see the grain is lifted. This is the oil with loads of, with some white spirit in to get it to soak through. This is the water based. Both got grain lift, but we can have a look there. Straight in with the 320 grit. So again, for the purposes of YouTube and to keep it interesting, I'm just going to show you the start of each grit and then zoom in on the grain. If you really want to see me sanding through all of this, then on Patreon you can see that unedited. Here we go. Okay, so that's the 320. Just give it a little wipe off. That's the underside on that one. Go on to 400. Hard to see on the black, but if you look on the grey, So we've already done the base coat, which is this one, the lacquer. We're now going to do the top coat, measure it out again. Very simple to do, 20% of this hardener. So we're going to have a total of 200 ml. That'll be enough to do all of it. 20 ml of hardener. So I quite like the roller. You can spray this obviously. I quite like the effect, the finish. There's a nice texture with the roller. Okay, we'll leave that for the first coat. It won't take long to dry. Cloth from last time. Just underside first. Doesn't really go into the resin, but I'm just going to put it on for a consistent. The buffer will just buff all of this off. Very simple, quick. Let those harden, and we'll come back and give them a tiny, tiny light brush. I don't mind using Abranet actually as just like a wiper, just to denib that, and then give it a tiny key. And then we do the second coat, and then we're done. Second coat. So now that's that finished really. Just going to polish the resin and the 2-pack in one hit tomorrow when it's cured, 24 hours. So the oil's pretty similar really. Just going to denib it. Feels pretty smooth already. Be a bit more careful with the oil on the resin, because it doesn't really build up, so just really light on the wood. The buffing will get in. That's so smooth now. The Heidelberg oil is really, really hard. I'm going to come back and just wipe off the excess in about 5 minutes, and then tomorrow I'm just going to buff across the grain and the resin, the same really on both boards. So I'm going to start on the water-based one, which is the 2-pack. Now, to be perfectly honest, it doesn't really need much, if anything at all. It feels really nice. This is not a very hard abrasive. I'll put a link. This is 5,000. So just going to put a little bit of 5,000 on, not too much, and then buff it in. This is just a wet cloth to get the polish off. So you could buff that even more. But that's my taste. It's sort of a flat gloss, really. Need to wet it. So you could use the cutting paste, the MW1 you've seen me use, but for the purposes of this tutorial, I thought I'd just keep it pretty simple. So we could keep polishing this on and on and on, using up to 4,000 grit if you like, or 1,400 grit on the wood. For me, this is a really good finish for this type of table. I hope you found that useful, the join across the grain. You can understand why I don't go into that much depth on all my builds. You should know by now I'm not hiding any secrets or keeping any of the good bits back. You have everything that I do, I show you on these videos. When it comes to the level of polishing and the amount of time you can take on your polishing, it really depends what you're doing it for and what your product is. So for me, these are for sale. They'll be at the Malvern show with me next weekend. weekend of the 11th. I think the Malvern show's the 8th to the 12th. So they'll be there, and these have got a price point, basically the size of the table, the sort of person that's going to buy them. So they're polished to a certain level. You can take this right to the extreme and go right to the 4000 grit. You can spend hours on buffing it like you would an expensive car, for instance. It's very different to wood, the way the resin reacts. As you've seen, we've put a 2-pack water base, which I'm really liking. I've got to be honest, it does feel very sealed. And I know it's heat resistant. I've done loads of tests on that 2-pack water base. I put hot cups, boiling cups of water, topping them up onto the same place, no ring marks. It's a really good finish for tabletops. But you can obviously do all kinds of French polishing and all different stuff. So this is just an insight into 2 of the types of finishes, the basics. So there's a 2-pack water based and a hardwax oil, both very easy to apply, as you see, and the results are really nice. There's the full version of these on the Patreon channel if you really want to sit and watch me buffing and sanding, which is a bit boring to watch. So but if you want to see that, or you need some more tips on that, that's on the Patreon channel. Thanks so much to my Patreons. I'll see you all on the next one.